So we have been joined by Councilmember Jacobson, fresh from China.
Apologies.
I'd like to call the meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Madigan,
Here.
Ms. Marlin,
Here.
Mr. Roberts, Mr. Smythe,
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. The first item, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, July 21st, 2014.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
by Ammons, seconded by Roberts. Any additions or corrections?
It was
Did I
Mike
get-
Madigan.
Did I get that wrong?
Mike Madigan made
All
the
right,
second.
let the record show that was seconded by Mike Madigan. Sorry for that. You're sitting right next to this guy, so I got mixed up. No additions or corrections. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? No additions? Okay. Petitions and communications. I would like to start by reading a proclamation. And this is about National Farmers Market Week. Whereas there are 357 farmers markets in the state of Illinois, and farmers markets are important outlets for agricultural producers nationwide, providing them with increased marketing opportunities. And whereas Urbana's Market at the Square has been a part of Urbana for 35 years and plays a key role in developing local and regional food systems that support local farmers and businesses and supports economic development in our community. And whereas thousands of farmers markets across the country offer consumers fresh, affordable, convenient, and healthful products sold directly from the farm, and whereas farmers markets, including Urbana's Market at the Square, increasingly offer electronic benefits transfer technology for use by Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program recipients in redeeming their benefits, and also offer opportunities for low-income women, infants, and children and seniors participating in the WIC and Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Programs, respectively, to redeem their benefits. Now, therefore, to further awareness of farmers markets and of the many important contributions farmers make to daily life in America, I, Laurel Lunt Pressing, Mayor of the City of Urbana, do hereby proclaim the week of August 3rd through the 9th, 2014 as National Farmers Market Week in the City of Urbana. I encourage the people of Urbana to celebrate the benefits of farmers markets and the bountiful production of our local farmers with appropriate observances and activities. Thank you. Okay, I have 3 people here. Reverend Dr. Evelyn and Bishop King James Underwood. They do not wish to speak, but they are concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems, for the record. Durrell Cruz. Durrell Cruz here? Oh, at the time of the thing? Okay, sorry about that. All right, David Brodsky.
Sorry, just give me a second here. It kicked us out. Do you need name and address for the record?
Yes, that would be good.
My name is David Brodsky. I live at 1920 Bridge Lane, Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm here representing myself and Natural Choice Holdings. I have one of my business partners, Richard Grossi, with me. We do have 2 other business partners from Danville that unfortunately were not able to make it this evening. We are here to talk about the implementation of medical marijuana in Illinois and specifically in Urbana. well, let me back up. We have 4 business partners. Myself, obviously a Colorado resident. Richard Grossi here with me is a Chicago resident. And then our other 2 business partners are both Danville residents, and I'll get into that in a little while. So our mission is to effectively implement the Illinois Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Project in a manner consistent with the community's values. We believe that we can achieve that with the legislation itself. It serves a good foundation. We believe that we have a solid foundation with our team and with community-minded execution and giving back to the community. We think that we can make this a success for everyone. So the legislation itself, I won't go over all the details. I have some supplemental information that I'll pass out here in a minute. We're in District 10. There's 9 counties. 2 dispensaries are going to be allowed. We think that it's more or less inevitable that one is at least going to be in Champaign-Urbana area. 1 cultivation center. There's a population of 550,000 people in the entire district, and we're projecting anywhere from 500 to 700 patients in this district. Now, we bumped that up a little bit than just a straight percentage of population because this is obviously a medical draw for the area. We're also anticipating initial harvest and sales to be somewhere between, and I put 2014, it's sometime between March and September of next year. And there's a large date range because there's still some questions about how these grows are going to be implemented. If people already have sites built out, if they don't, there could be quite a bit of lag, and it does take about 4 months to get your first crop. Okay, so our team, Chirag Shah, again, is not able to be here. He's a lawyer located in Danville, practices patent law, and he's also an adjunct professor at the University of Illinois. Richard Grossi here is a CPA, non-practicing accountant, but is the CEO of McKinsey Incorporated. We have Inder Rakala, who is a pharmacist from the Danville area, is a 28-year resident of Danville. Myself, David Brodsky, I have obviously the industry experience and knowledge that I'm bringing to the team. And then Matt Cho, I put his name on there. He's not a principal of the business, but he is going to sit on our board, and I know that he is a face that you all are familiar with. This is our storefront in Steamboat. On the left there is our medical, and then on the right is our retail side, where it's just treated like alcohol, 21 and over. We'd have to maintain a separation. I included this. I just wanted to show you how discreet it can be. You know, there's no flashing signs, no neon. That is our only signage. There is no street signage for us. In Routt County, which is where Steamboat is located, there are 3 dispensaries, and those 3 dispensaries are generating about $40,000 a week in payroll and have generated about $350,000 in local sales tax, and that's the piece that stays in the community that doesn't go to the state. I included this in the supplemental information I'll give you shortly, but actually just last week the local paper published a resounding success story for Steamboat, and the success that the program has had in Steamboat, and our chief of police has labeled recreational marijuana, again treated as 21 and over, just like alcohol, as a non-issue in our community, and we're hoping to be able to do that here as well. So community-minded execution, these again are the same goals that we have in Steamboat, and we want to bring these here. We focus on safety for our community, for our employees, and for our patients. That's in physical safety at the location, and then also for our patients in providing a quality organic product if we can. Keeping medical marijuana out of the hands of minors, preventing out-of-state diversion, and educating patients on marijuana-inhibited driving. We use a marijuana tracking system, which we plan on using here, called MJ Freeway. As you can see by the image there, it tracks every gram. When we batch in a gram into our inventory system, we sell it, and it actually weigh it out on a scale right there that's attached to our point-of-sale system. So everything is tracked and kept track of. Want to be a good neighbor. Potential sites we're looking at are all in B4 zoning, which is compliant with the upcoming zoning regulations that you will discuss this evening. We have odor mitigation techniques, so it won't bother the neighbors. Dispensaries, of course, per the statute, will be 1,000 feet from schools, churches, and daycares. And then a question that we noticed on the last time you had a speaker was what the traffic count was going to be. And we're anticipating, at least at the onset, less than 50 folks a day actually coming to the store. So not a whole lot of traffic. Another issue is providing accessible medication to all. Currently, medical marijuana is not covered by Medicaid or Medicare and is not covered by traditional insurance. So we are in the process of developing a scheme to be able to provide medicine to those that need it regardless of their income status. Giving back to the community. Back to the tax and revenues and jobs. Our dispensary, we're projecting 1 full-time and 3 part-time employees when we get started. Potential for up to 5 full-time and 10 part-time once the program kind of gets fully implemented. And we're anticipating about $100,000 in new tax revenue annually for the city of Urbana. And again, that is your piece of the sales tax that stays directly here in the community. Community contributions to drug addiction causes. Richard Grossi here sits on the board of Heartland. That's a mental health and drug abuse nonprofit organization. Now they're located north near Chicago, but we're using those connections to try and find someone closer down here to be able to partner with. And we are planning on making a community contribution of 5% of net profits to that cause. Research, we're currently exploring partnerships with some U of I researchers to do some medical marijuana research. It's part of the statute. We think it's important, and we plan on not only implementing that research, but also contributing, again, 5% of our net profits. Okay, so Urbana's role. We're here. I obviously came in from out of town. The state is going to choose, who gets these licenses, and we think that as a community for Urbana, it would be in the community's best interest to actually, vet the applicants themselves. And the best way to do that is to vet the applicants and actually, if you want to go so far, to actually provide a recommendation or a, what's the word I'm looking for? Endorsement. An endorsement, there you go. An endorsement for a particular group, and that would carry a lot of weight with the state. And we would ask that we would get that endorsement. Certainly, obviously not going to happen tonight, but we would like to have an ongoing conversation with you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have a question? Eric?
So, if I'm understanding rightly, your license, even though this is going to happen here and we'll establish the rules, your license for this region would be granted by the state and not by the cities, or am I correct?
Correct. Yes. Okay. The Department of Professional Regulations and Responsibilities will be deciding who gets these licenses for the dispensaries, and then the Department of Agriculture decides who gets the cultivation sites.
Diane?
I spent a lot of time today trying to find an answer to this question, and no one knew the answer, so maybe you do. How are the financial transactions conducted? Is it a cash-based business? Do you have an alternative to traditional banking?
The way we operate in our dispensary in Colorado, we certainly take cash. We also have what's called a cashless ATM, so we are able to take cards on site. And we actually do have a bank account. We work with a local bank in Colorado. There are banks in Colorado that are working with the industry. It's discreet, it's low-key. They're not exactly advertising it because they don't want to bring extra scrutiny to themselves. The banks, in order to do this, the federal government has given them the okay but they do have to do a little bit of extra regulatory filings, and we pay a small premium for them.
Are
to
all
do
those
that.
options allowed in Illinois?
We're currently exploring those options right
So
now.
you don't know yet either?
We have not found anyone yet. Yeah, it really is up to the individual bank. It's to their risk tolerance. Do they want to do business with the industry and do these extra regulatory filings, or do they not really want to take that risk? It's up to the individual bank.
So the cashless ATM would take a regular credit card or debit card
Correct.
on the premises?
Correct.
Or you're dealing in cash?
Correct.
Thank you.
If I may just go a little further, at the beginning of the program, a lot of people paid only cash. One, because the banks just were not on board at all, and then also a lot of folks didn't want it traced back to them because it was kind of this new thing. So it was a lot of cash up front, but now we are seeing the majority credit cards and debit cards.
Bill Brown.
Yeah, I saw that you also included churches as 1,000 feet from churches. I don't think that's part of the Illinois legislation. They just had daycares, schools. So you're saying you would include churches as well?
I thought that was part of the legislation. It's part of the legislation in Colorado, so maybe I just added it.
It wasn't in our packet. But,
Okay. I have in the supplemental information I'm going to give you, I do have a executive summary that's provided by the marijuana policy organization in Washington, D.C. They're a big advocacy group, so I'm sure we'd be able to find it in there.
Okay. And then trying to figure out how you came up with 100,000 sales tax revenue at 1%. That's 10 million sales, so about $10,000 per person, per customer, per year. Does that sound about right?
I'll let Richard.
Or more.
We used
15, somewhere between 10 and 15,000.
no, we as David said, we were looking at between 500 to 700 patients for the dispensary, and so, given the fact that a patient can only consume, I think it's 1 ounce every 2.5 weeks, so we're using those kind of numbers. We came up to what the revenue would be for the dispensary, and then we use a 3.5% tax rate because that's the tax funds that would stay in the community, because there's other taxes that would be sent to the state. So that's how we came up with that number.
Are you-
I
are
think
you
we were
talking-
told 1% on.
It's the 1%, and then you also have a 1.5% home rule. The only thing that the 6.5% sales tax for the state that is currently in place for most items, medical marijuana is being treated as a prescription drug. So that 6.5 gets knocked down to 1%. And there has not been any clarification from the state if that 1% is going to stay in the community at all. So that $100,000 was solely comprised of your home rule sales tax, and I believe there was a county education tax on there as well.
And neither one of those currently apply to prescriptions, I don't think,
They are not.
as far as I know. We can check that.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get an idea of, so 50 people per day, and these are people with pretty major medical problems. So I don't know why the children need to be protected by 2,500 feet or 1,000 feet from people with medical problems, but that's the way it is from the state, so I understand those restrictions, I guess. So can you explain a little bit more about how the dispensing companies are chosen? I mean, it sounds like, should we expect a lot of people to be coming for an endorsement? You're the first ones.
We know of two serious groups in the area on top of ours, so 3 that we know of, including ourselves. The state will pick the applicant based on a merit-based system. They're going to have a scoring rubric with different items. They have not released that scoring rubric, of course, so we're all waiting for that. But based on those scores, that's how they're going to pick the applicants, and then they also have some tiebreaker provisions where certain sections take precedent, and that's where they go for tiebreakers.
Okay. And then finally, just as far as people qualifying to purchase the marijuana at a particular dispensary, it's not something where somebody could switch dispensaries for the weekend because they're coming to a football game here and decide to buy something here instead of at their regular dispensary in Chicago. I mean, once you're signed up with the dispensary, that's usually the one you pretty much have to go with.
Correct.
So we would expect people to sign up here that are residents here.
That are residents or that maybe come here for their medical care.
That might benefit from it. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Eric?
So, assuming that we would consider providing an endorsement, I'm just trying to think of what information would be useful to us to make a decision such as that.
Mhm.
And I think the first thing that comes to my mind are specific statements addressed to us from our counterparts in the communities where you are, for example, Steamboat Springs. Other members of the council or the mayor may have different ideas about what would really be important to them. The only other thing I'd ask is I would hope that we could have electronically your slides for us to reflect on later.
Absolutely. We use Prezi to do this, and they're all available online, and I can shoot emails out and show you how to do that.
Dennis?
And so we're just learning about this whole opportunity to open up this service in the community. Do you know for what the parameters are for the licensing as far as timeline? Not so much to adopt it, but say that you were awarded the contract or the license. At what span of years is it renewable, and do you have options, or does the licensing receiver have options to transfer the license?
The license cannot be transferred. They have a provision in there that says without prior approval, but the language also, it's a little confusing. The language also kind of makes it clear that they cannot be transferred. The legislation actually sunsets in January 1st of 2018. So this was a 4-year program when they passed it, but we're kind of running through that time. So we'll have all of 2017, all of 2016, and we're anticipating about half of 2015. So it'll be about a 2.5-year program where you actually have a storefront open in the community. We're anticipating the applications being accepted either later this month or early September, with decisions being made around the first of the year. And then once the decision is made and we are told you may have the license, we have 6 months to be up and running.
And one more question. Your storefront that you showed us had 2 windows in it, and from my reading of the legislation here in Illinois, there would not be allowed any windows on the building. So are you aware of that difference? Is that something you've been tracking?
We haven't gotten any clarification on that, but the way Colorado deals with it, the windows have to be blacked out.
So you could locate in a building that has windows, so a storefront style building, and you would just have to black them out.
Correct. And those 2 windows that you saw were blacked out.
Blacked out.
Yep.
Diane?
How long have you been in business? How many dispensaries do you operate? And are you looking for an existing structure? I take it you're not going to build.
No. Yeah, we are definitely looking for an existing structure, and
What square footage are you looking for?
about 6,000.
Okay.
That's the facility that we're looking at. We certainly probably will not need 6,000 square feet for 50 patients a day, but that's what's available, and that is what meets the new zoning regulations that you will discuss this evening. I only own and operate 1 dispensary. I have a business partner, so I am a co-owner. I've been involved in Colorado for the last year, and I worked 3 years prior in the medical marijuana industry in California as well. I did not own a dispensary there. I was just involved in the industry.
So 1 year experience.
The last 1 year I have owned a dispensary, yes.
And you've identified a building already?
Correct. And that, again, that information's in the supplemental info that I'll hand out here in a second.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, we'll move on. Unfinished business. I don't think we have any that we're going to deal with tonight. Reports from standing committees, the Committee of the Whole. Who chaired the Committee of the Whole? That would be Bill Brown.
Yes, we met last week and we forwarded several resolutions and ordinances to council, all with recommendation for approval. First is ordinance number 2014-07-067, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class C licenses for Freedom Oil Company, 1812 North Cunningham. And for the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Hammonds,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Madigan.
Is this for the liquor license?
Yeah.
Yes.
I need to
Oh,
recuse myself.
Whoa. Mr. Madigan recuses himself. Okay.
Ms. Marlin? Mr.
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries.
Next is resolution number 2014-07-040R, a resolution approving the purchase of fanfare for the permanent collection of public art of the city of Urbana. For the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
Next is resolution number 2014-07-042R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a contract for professional services with Peckham, Guyton, Albers, and Viets Incorporated, FY 2014-2015. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Um,
Was that a comment?
Oh, he wants to, this is on the TIF? You didn't say what it was for? Okay, Darrell Cruz wants to comment. So who made the motion? You made it, and it was
And I
seconded by
second.
Roberts, okay.
Phyllis may have passed a letter around. I think I'd like to.
Okay, you want to say your name and address for the record?
Yeah, and Darrell Cruz, 2007 South George Huff Drive, Urbana. And I trust that you received the email message that I sent out a couple of days ago. And unfortunately, what I have to say tonight in that email doesn't come close to the appropriate type of discussion that needs to be made regarding TIFs on a more extended basis and all of the ramifications and implications that are part of this particularly important vote of yours tonight. And I'd like to just read this to you and share my thoughts. Tonight you'll be voting to hire PGA at V for $35,000, ironically TIF 2 money, to conduct an eligibility analysis and to write a redevelopment plan for a new downtown TIF increment financing district, or TIF. The timing, the framing, and a rationale for this proposal are all very questionable. There is no doubt PGAF will be able to complete both tasks and present the City Council with a report that touts the anticipated economic benefits of a downtown TIF. That is what they'll be paying to do and have done in the past. Unfortunately, there are likely to be few dissident voices. Few citizens are aware or understand TIFs, and local taxing bodies frequently acquiesce to the city in fear of being viewed as anti-city or anti-business, as they desire to maintain positive public relations with the community. Therefore, much more discernment is required of the City Council. You must be the unbiased judges of the claimed benefits of TIF, as well as the community guardians of the potential costs and risks. After 35 years of TIF 1, an important question is, has TIF 1 been successful? Certainly downtown infrastructure is in much better shape, but business and most importantly, EAV growth has flattened and declined in recent years. TIF districts were intended to be temporary, not permanent, to address blight, not marginal ancillary programs, maybe like fanfare tonight that you spend $1,000 of TIF money on. After decades of reliance on TIF dollars, the city appears unwilling or unable to develop a non-TIF vision for economic development and considers TIF funding as its own and ageless. Proposing a continuation of a downtown TIF for 58 years strongly suggests this to be true. City staff state a new downtown TIF is necessary to have a robust tool to incentivize economic development. Historically, this is just not true. TIF-induced economic development in downtown has always been questionable and uncertain. Some examples: the Lincoln Hotel, the Morning Cup, the Urbana Butcher Shop, V. Picasso, Heartland Gallery, Das Cafe, because it assumes risk the private sector will not accept, distorts the natural flow of private capital investment, creates an uneven playing field for non-TIF businesses, and most importantly, deprives local taxing bodies of their full property tax revenue. While the city is publicly chastising Carl charity property tax exemption loss of $300,000, at the same time, it is collecting over $1,800,000 annually in property tax revenue in TIFs 1 and 2 from the very same taxing partners they are claiming to defend. Ironic. Maybe Carl should be paying their fair share of property tax, but at the same time, should the city be endlessly collecting much-needed property taxes for another 23 years from other local taxing bodies to incentivize downtown economic development, when experience now shows this approach to EAV growth has been morbid? I believe property taxes rightfully due to the school district should be used for education, park district taxes for parks, public health taxes for public health. It will take decades for these taxing bodies to recoup the full $23,500,000 collected by the city in
You
TIFs
have 1
1
minute,
and
Mr.
2.
Cruz.
Has the time arrived where the community at large would benefit more by allowing these tax bodies to have their full property taxes and the city charting a different course? The downtown TIF needs to end as scheduled in 2016. If the city wants to continue to incentivize economic development downtown, it should use its own revenue, such as the annual TIF 1 and 2 increment of $280,000 that you currently have. In 23 years, that investment would total $6,440,000, certainly not an empty toolbox as suggested by staff. Without any TIF rules and regulations, the city would be free to use this money anywhere in the city for incentivizing economic development. By using city increment revenues, along with reviewing, may I have just a minute to finish the 2 paragraphs?
Move for an extra minute.
Second.
By using city increment revenues, along with the city reviewing fees, zoning, and ordinances negatively affecting businesses, the city may produce a healthier business climate, resulting in more stable, long-term business or economic outcomes. Local taxing bodies would then have more revenue to provide their services to the community, while also lowering their need to raise taxes, a healthy secondary outcome, especially in light of today's tax situation. After 2016, I encouraged the city to take a 5-year moratorium on TIF 1. If after 5 years a different approach doesn't better serve the city, you can always reconstitute a new downtown TIF before 2021 when TIF 2 expires. After 35 years, it's time to try a new approach. Thank you.
Any questions for Daryl?
I just have one.
Carol?
Mr. Cruz, you named specific businesses in this paragraph that talks about questionable, uncertain use of the TIF. Did you also look at each individual's revenue, meaning the tax that actually came from those businesses?
No, I didn't look at the exact dollar amounts.
Okay.
I think examples were like in Sunday's article. I think there's $1 million that was given to the mall. There was this $1.3 million to the Lincoln Hotel. There was $70,000 to the tower renovation. You know, $60,000 to, or $40,000 to the art project on Lincoln. There's been a host of $40,000 or $20,000 on Cabanas recently. It was all TIF money, and this is being paid out of TIF money. And it's easy to spend other people's tax money when it isn't your own.
Thank you.
I would like to offer one correction, and that is your statement that Carl's charity property tax exemption cost the city $300,000. It's really $1 million, not $300,000. The $300,000 was just some additional properties that were taken off at the last minute.
Right.
So,
Oh, Eric.
Okay.
So I think it's, you know, this is the kind of expenditure that's notoriously hard to evaluate because you can't do the experiment. That is, you can't go at a particular point in time with the same city and both use TIF and not use TIF and see which way it turned out better. But there are some scholarly studies that that do evaluate outcomes across a wide range of cities based on the use of TIF. And I'd be happy to be pointed to some of those in case I've overlooked them, but the ones that I have seen actually do support the TIF strategy that that Urbana has developed. Obviously, if X, you know, if N businesses, if you incentivize N businesses, not all N will survive because lots of businesses don't survive, incentive or not. The question is, I think, whether on balance we are doing better for having TIF'd than not. And as well as I can judge, you know, based on assessment of TIF programs around the country, we are. But I'm completely open to, you know, to looking at new information that really is statistically sound on this issue.
Yeah, Chicago, St. Louis, there's been U of I studies. The studies are mixed. It depends on the community and what's happened. I think instead of looking at studies, it's, well, just to look what's the history of Urbana, because each city is unique. So the whole theory of TIF was that the EAV growth promoted by TIF within that district at 23 years down the road, all of those other local taxing partners, the EAV would have grown more than it would have normally grown on its own, that they would then be able to recoup those dollars. It isn't just the new streets or the businesses. It also is, will those taxing bodies be able to recover that $23,500,000? How long will it take them to do that with the EAV growth that has occurred in TIF 1, just in TIF 1? And according to the report, the EAV growth has declined and been morbid the last 15 years. So the question is, things look good and businesses come, but also the parallel question is, what about the tax money that's a school district? You know, the $1.3 million that is in the Lincoln Hotel, 53 or 52% of that is tax dollars that the school district could have used to hire teachers and buy materials and programs. If 52% of all the property taxes and my tax bill comes from the school district, when I know the school district gets money back, and there are special projects that can be given in TIF districts for schools, like air conditioning at Washington and sidewalks and things like that, but never the full amount. So the secondary question is the community as a whole. Are we as a whole benefiting, not just a small area of downtown? And the question is, 50 8 years. My question is, has downtown ever thrived? Has private enterprise and free market ever worked before TIF started? Of course it has. You set them. How did the businesses get there in the first place? TIFs began in 1981. Okay? You got the infrastructure. I love the infrastructure. What I question is whether you should be using money for schools, health care, parks to supplement businesses. And you have your own money.
Mayor.
Use your own $280,000 to do that.
I think we got 3 minutes worth of information.
Yeah. I would point out that the taxing bodies support Urbana's TIFs.
I understand.
So they feel that they have benefited.
Well, I don't know, because I worked in a
Well,
school district as
They
superintendent.
say that
said
they
it.
have benefited, so that would be an important consideration. And also,
In light of the loss that they not received?
well, also the businesses that you point out that failed, most small businesses fail, and I think all these businesses have been replaced. Urbana Lincoln
See, that's the point.
is the exception, but all the ones that failed, there is now another business there.
Absolutely. It's kind of recycling TIF investment instead of looking at the free market. There's a number of ways to look at this, and in 5 minutes, it is with those, it's like tonight. You heard a business coming in. They don't need TIF money. There's an incentive to make money, and they will start a business, and it will occur naturally. When are you going to let the natural market, the natural flow, and appropriate uses of taxes to go back to those other taxing bodies where they rightfully belong and were intended to be after 23 years?
Your
And now
time
you're
is
going
up, Mr.
58
Cruz.
years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Question?
Mike?
Well, I mean, as long as we're engaging them, I think we ought to be able to keep this conversation open without interruption.
Well, people do have time limits, but did you have another question?
I do.
Okay, go
Actually,
ahead.
Actually, not a question so much as a comment. I'm not so sure that the News Gazette article, and Darrell, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm not so sure that the News Gazette article looked at EAV in terms of time value of money. I believe that actually the EAV in TIF 1 has decreased
The last
over
few-
the life of the TIF.
No, I don't think it's over the life of the TIF. I think it was, but I think
We,
it's been the
well,
last
we
2
ought to
years.
look at those numbers, because I'm not so sure the time value of money was considered in that, in those calculations. And that's very important. I mean, if we're looking at EAV, I mean, I know there are potentially other benefits of TIF. I'm not trying to just narrow it down to EAV, but that's a big component.
It's a
And
big one.
if you put inflation to the EAV, I'm not sure that the numbers flesh out to where it is where it has increased.
Carol?
I don't necessarily have a question for Mr. Cruz, but last week at the Committee of the Whole, I think some of the question about TIF functions and whether it's beneficial overall, and I haven't been able to rectify that since I've been on the council. I went to a training a year ago on TIFs that really complicated this issue. And for me, looking just from the vision of TIFs, the benefit is not necessarily able to be seen as clearly outside of the infrastructure things that you mentioned. Those are easy for us to quantify. But the problem I have with the TIF is the recycling of the businesses in the same building and then recycling the next one, and we actually never get the money back that we actually invested. That's the problem I have with the TIFs and with their current function. So I think that what I would be actually liking to do right now is I'd like for our staff to respond to this, because I think what Mr. Cruz has raised is for the consideration of the council and not just to ignore it as if there's not some concerns that's being raised in this document. And I also would like to, at this point, I'd like to make a substitute motion and defer resolution number 2014-07-042R back to committee so that we'll have time to respond to this and make sure that we are not paying $35,000 for something we already kind of know and some research has been done for us. And that's my motion, if there's a second.
Apparently, there's not a second. Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion by Brown, seconded by Roberts.
Mayor,
Yes. Charlie?
I'd like to discuss this amongst ourselves here
Okay.
a little bit. I think the issue is that we need some expert help, and this particular firm is particularly good and has a very good reputation in helping answer some of the questions that have been raised tonight. We have some studies that staff have done of TIF 1, 2, 3, and 4 and their productivity. And I think that the questions that have been raised tonight, Brandon's work and Brandon and other staff members that have worked on those analyses need to put them all together with the consultant and bring us answers to the questions that have been raised tonight. And I know TIF 1 has been flat, but TIFs 2, 3, and 4 have been far more productive. Why is TIF 1 flat while TIFs 2, 3, and 4 have been productive? What has worked in one and not worked in another? And we need to answer those questions. Those are legitimate questions, you know. And if TIF for the city has been a good thing, then we probably want to continue it in some very careful way. If it's not, then we should do as Darrell says and take a moratorium and try some other ideas. So but I think we have to start with this study along with the questions that everybody has raised and bring in the analyses that I've seen already from Brandon and others. They're beginning work on trying to develop measures of how TIF has performed.
Who is first here? Bill Brown.
Yeah, from what I understand, this is a feasibility study that would see what potential TIF would look like that would meet the requirements of the state, and probably not one that would give us a lot of economic information as far as how successful our past TIFs have been. So I know staff is willing to do that and has started on that, so I'm looking forward to that. I don't see it as a either or. I think both need to be done because I think in order to see whether we want to do the next TIF, we have to see what it would look like, how much of TIF 2 could be incorporated in it, and how much of TIF 2 could just be released, you know, and go back into the tax rolls. And I need a little bit clarification if once that process starts is how the Boneyard bonds would be paid off with TIF 2 if we un-TIF some of it and things like that. So I still have a lot of questions, and I'm not opposed to sending this back to the committee, but I think we need to have a little discussion here first and see how much we know and whether we need to send the feasibility study back to committee, or if that's something we can agree on, that $35,000 is a good investment to see what the next TIF would look like. At this point, I think it is. And then just a couple of comments on Darrell's comments. I don't think EAV is the only thing you should look at to measure the success of a TIF. Some of the things generate a lot of sales tax, which also helps the schools now, which definitely helps the city. That's not considered in the EAV. Projects like the Boneyard project obviously isn't going to be taxable. It's not going to immediately contribute to the EAV, but maybe 10 years, 20 years down the road as things develop, we'll be much better off than we would have without it. So some of the intangibles I think you need to consider and need to look farther out. So taking a simplistic view of just how much has the EVA gone up over the last 20 years might not be the best approach to evaluate something. As a total of our EAV, it's currently wrapped up in TIFs. There's 6 million increment in TIF 1, 8 million in TIF 2, 13 in TIF 3. So that's 27 million, or about 5% of our total for the city's EAV. We have 540 million EAV. As a percentage of the school district, it's even less because they have additional property outside the city, so it's more like 4% of the school district. So even if we gave everything in all of our TIFs back to the taxing bodies, the school district would be able to lower their taxes by 25 cents of their $5.76 rate. That would still be $1.25 higher than Champaign's currently. So there'd still be a ways to go. I don't think that's not the thing, or that's not the solution to fixing the tax equation. So in general, I have concerns about wasting TIF money, and maybe we can do a better job. I think a lot of the programs are pretty good, and they've evolved over the past 10 years to contribute even better, I think. Be a little more discriminatory about how you give out the money. And I think Carol raised a great point about subsidizing businesses that tend to move on and don't make it. I understand small businesses, that's the majority of small businesses do fail, but I think we need to be a little more, maybe in the next plan, figure out a little better way to decide whether something is really a capital improvement or is it just remodeling. And do we want to subsidize remodeling that they would have to do if they locate on the edge of town, or is it really something that's going to make the property worth more and make it more marketable? So at this point, I think I'm willing to support going on with the feasibility study, but I'm also willing to listen to what other people have to say. Thanks.
Dennis Roberts.
Well, that was very comprehensive, so thanks, Bill. Yeah, I look at some of the expenditures of the TIF in the district that didn't work out as well. And of course, we're encouraging business growth and a new business in our TIF districts. But also, one of the major aspects of the TIF is to create capital investment in infrastructure, and many of the landscape improvements and streetscapes. And certainly the entire Boneyard project that we have going on now and is nearing completion, perhaps this fall, would probably not really be possible in our capital improvement plan without the assistance of this income. And these investments are long-term positive ones for the city, so all the community will benefit from them. I would agree more with Carol in questioning or having desire to look at the feasibility of reevaluating, the startup, pop-up grants that we give. These are businesses which go through economic development training and marketing plans through the Small Business Administration here in the city to get training as a startup. The question really is, in my mind, whether a pop-up or a startup, what is its long-term commitment and contribution to the community, and are we, these are small grants, and maybe that's very helpful and useful, but the question really is, what's the long-term benefit? I think that it'll be necessary to have a professional company come and give us some advice, and perhaps also to get interaction and feedback from the other TIF bodies that would be investing in this. The school district, Parkland College, Mass Transit. So I think the study is going to be necessary. It's not a lot of money, and we've spent more money and had less return for it, and in some other experiences in the past. We might as well invest it now and go forward in the future. I think the TIF is here to be of assistance to us, and I think it's probably a very useful tool for our community.
Carol Ammons.
So I think I don't necessarily have a concern with a feasibility study that is focused on what they gave to us, which is a new redevelopment plan of attracting new businesses to downtown. I have a concern about the implementation of the TIF, what the money goes towards. Right before we expired TIF 3, I had asked a question, because I'm still a little shaky about TIF and how it should be applied, about using TIF money for redevelopment in Dr. Ellis to correct the pipe issues, which is an infrastructure problem. And I was told clearly that we could not use TIF money for that type of correction, which I thought would be infrastructure. It was city down the streets. It was a main issue. They couldn't use it for that purpose. But each time we get a TIF request, it's for things that, in my mind, don't necessarily fit into the description of what the state describes as TIF implementation. That's where I really have concern. The second one is that the PGAV company, who is, and it is an irony that we're paying them out of TIF. That should be an irony, because according to the definition of TIF, it's supposed to be to eliminate blight in an area. So paying a company out of TIF to define what TIF should be doing in the next phase of TIF seems a little counterproductive, as well as then tying staff members to a TIF that we pay out of our budget, part of their salary out of TIF, which again seems to be, and I've raised these questions before, so this is not the first time, but that seems to be counterintuitive to trying to either redevelop a new plan that don't rely so heavily on TIF, or require the implementation of TIF to fit a certain criteria, of which I don't believe is going to come out of this study. So that's my concern. Since I've been on the council, we haven't had a discussion about what TIF really is structured to do, how they should function, when they should be retired. They are perpetual, it seems, and if they are, how do we make sure that we don't give, even if it's pop-up grants, and I've been through the SBA training before, there were specific requirements that you had to be in business for a certain amount of time in order for you to get these kind of assistance. But what we've seen is, since I've only been here a little over a year and a half, that the grants have just kind of gone out the door, and you drive down the street and, oh, that business is gone, and now we got another business in there, and they get a grant, and then they're gone, and so on. That, to me, is not appropriate use of the TIF. And I'd like for us to, even if the council decides to support the feasibility of developing a new TIF, the requirements of that TIF need to be stricter, need to be redefined to fit what I believe is the development of, as TIF is described, plight in an area, to improve the infrastructure of that area, and not so much just whatever we decide can fit into that TIF. And I think that that's what I've had problems with since I've been on the council. So that's my concern. The reason why I wanted to move it back is for us to address some of these issues so that the consultant, and I need to be clarified, is the consultant told, in this case, to develop a plan strictly of downtown, of developing the new TIF and how we're going to spend that money? Or is it, what should the TIF be doing? How do we develop a real robust economic situation in downtown Urbana? We look at our sister city and it's just growing and booming by leaps and bounds. What are we missing, right? I think we should answer that question before we implement a new TIF, and certainly before we send $35,000, which don't seem like a lot, but it seems like a lot for my circle.
Diane?
Well, I think I'm going to support a feasibility study, but as I said last week, I also want a very, very robust analysis of how the TIFs have performed across the city. And as I expressed last week, I'm concerned about the number of staff people supported by TIF. I think it's 4 or 5 FTEs. And we've become increasingly reliant on it for programs and all sorts of different services. So we do need a very good, honest, objective analysis of the TIF to go along with this feasibility study we're going to get, as well as looking at, we have a redevelopment plan from 2004, and from what I've seen, we haven't done a whole lot of what was in that 2004 and plan for TIF 1. So how that would be part of the analysis. What have we done based on what that plan called for 10 years ago, and if we didn't do it, why not, and what do we learn from that? But I also it's very tempting to compare ourselves to our sister city, but we have to remember that this is Urbana and it's not Champaign, and we're half the size of our sister city, and there are a whole lot of different factors affecting Urbana than Champaign. So we really need to focus on Urbana and what Urbana can be, and learn from other communities, but let's compare ourselves to what we've done in the past, where we are today, and where we need to be in the future. And we're a long way from where we need to be in the future. But I will support this feasibility study.
Eric?
I would just like to comment on the selection of PVAG. I don't, from their literature that I've seen, their references to other communities, I don't think they're at all a booster for a mindless use of TIF. And I think that their experience in consulting with many, many different communities and their ability to, bring that experience to focus on our issues is valuable and is worth the consulting fee. I've lived here pretty long time, since 1971. So I can remember a time when there were many, many more vacancies, vacant buildings, inactive buildings in downtown Urbana than there are now. So I don't have, I don't have at my fingertips the statistics, but I know what it was like to wander around in what was, relative to now, pretty much of a ghost town. So I disagree with anybody who says that we didn't have blight in downtown Urbana, not in terms of, horrible danger, dark futuristic science fiction danger city, but certainly in terms of a downtown that was moribund. And I think that we have made enormous progress in certainly in the downtown, and I think, and we've also had significant development elsewhere in Urbana. So typically all over the country, people argue about TIF in terms of arguing about what is the definition of blight. But I would say more broadly that if an area is not living up to what its economic potential should be and what its economic contribution to the city should be, that it is indeed an appropriate candidate for to consider for TIF.
Okay, we have a motion by Brown, seconded by Roberts. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
No.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin? Yes. Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Bill?
Let's see. D?
You're on D.
Okay. Ordinance number 2014-07-068, an ordinance approving a second amendment to an agreement for use of right-of-way with Gargoyle Technologies Incorporated DBA Volo Broadband. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next is ordinance number 2014-07-069, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance FY 2014-15 for irrigation system research grant.
I'll second.
For the committee, I move approval.
Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor Pressing?
Yes.
Next, we have a couple of traffic code ordinances. Ordinance number 2014-07-070, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets, Ash Street. For the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Ordinance number 2014-07-071, an ordinance amending Schedule F of Section 23-83 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, designating one-way streets and alleys, Anderson Street between Florida Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion?
Just one.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, I unfortunately was absent last week, so it may be that this was fully discussed, but my eyebrows went up a little bit at the notion of managing a street to be one-way for limited hours. Is that, are we all satisfied that this logistical problem is not really a big problem? I think the chair of the...
Well, I'm sure Bill Gray could more capably answer this, but this is, it's next to Wiley School, and it's been, we've been doing this as a pilot project for some months now, and it's been well received by the school and by the neighborhood. So it's a time management thing during drop-off for the school.
Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next, we have resolution number 2014-07-041R, a resolution authorizing the entry into and execution of an agreement between the City of Urbana, Illinois, and the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next is ordinance number 2014-07-072, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 25, Legacy Tree Program, Section 25-65, about consent. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
No.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
And then finally, ordinance number 2014-07-073, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance FY 2014-15 for Windsor Road reconstruction, Philo to Race. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
People are starting to jump the gun on seconding. Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by Ammons.
No. It's my ward. Can I
all
have
right,
this
which
one?
Would you like to grant the lead?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, lady from Ward 7 has the second. Okay. All right, any discussion? I wasn't here either, so what is actually the ordinance change?
This was adjustment in, do you want to talk about it, Bill? It's adjustment in the amount for the expense, right?
The federal dollars will pass through the city, so we're doing a budget amendment ordinance to receive those revenues and then to create an expenditure line item to expend those funds. So
it's a good thing.
that's a good thing, yes.
Okay, thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe? Mayor Pressing?
Yes. That motion carries. Reports of special committees. Reports of officers. Bill Gray.
Hopefully, you've all received an invitation postcard of the groundbreaking for Olympian Drive next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. It's at the dead end, if you will, of Olympian Drive, just east of Apollo Drive, so you can park along the street there or on Apollo itself. So we plan to have a short groundbreaking and a few pictures, a few words by our leaders spoken at that time. So if you can come, great. And wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
So that's not tomorrow, that's the week after?
Week from Tuesday.
Yeah, okay.
Week from tomorrow. You don't have to bring your own hard hats now. We'll provide them.
Well,
And
thank you, that's
shovels.
very good. Anything else? Dennis?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm going to be taking a flight out of Bloomington right at that hour, so I'm not going to be making it, but I would certainly support, and I wished I could be there for that event because I think it's a very significant one for the development of the northern part of the community.
It's in your ward. No?
Yeah.
Okay, Libby Tyler.
I have the Economic Development Activities Report for July 2014 that Brandon Boyce put together. And first, some notes on downtown, and I want to thank the City Council for the support of the downtown and the redevelopment programs that we've had over the last several years. The Curbanas are up and operating, and I hope everybody's had a firsthand chance to participate in those new facilities on Main Street, and they've really added quite a bit to the look and the vibrancy of the downtown, and very well appreciated by the businesses who've been participating. Continue to show great occupancy in a lot of the smaller businesses, as was being discussed earlier. Two, I'll just point out, C2E video conferencing training startup at CoLab. And another interesting one is about Miss Possible. And this is a product that is working to engage girls in science and technology, and that also is coming out of the CoLab space in downtown Urbana and has even been promoted by Melinda Gates of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Also in the downtown just north of City Hall, we will be bringing to the council a brokerage agreement with a national company that will be marketing that site for us for redevelopment. Up on University Avenue, hopefully as well, many of you have been able to attend the new Wendy's store, and it's so done so well that there's actually some improvements to the parking that need to be made to make sure everybody can get in and get their meals quickly and safely. University Avenue around Goodwin, complete new look now with the demolition of that very large project underway, the Campus Circle apartment complex. The mayor read the proclamation on Urbana's Market at the Square, and I would just remind the council and anyone else who's interested that this Saturday, August 9th at 8:30 a.m. at the City of Urbana tent at the northwest entrance to the market, we will be reading the proclamation again and celebrating this week, which is National Farmers Market Week, and also celebrating the fact that this is the 35th year of Urbana's Market at the Square. It's been going fantastically this year, and one of the strongest Julys. We had 7,000 patrons visit on July 19th, so fantastic attendance. Let's see, we're also working, one last point, we've been working on a new business survey based on the last two, but with some additional questions, and this will be primarily an electronic survey, and we expect that to be going out later this month. We've also been working closely with the CU Folk and Roots Festival along with the Urbana Business Association for that upcoming event. Any questions?
I have one.
Carol.
On the business development grants, can you explain a little bit in summary how that program works?
You'd like a summary of how the program works?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's on the website, there's this great drawing of our incentive programs.
Okay.
And there's the startup grants when they start, and then there's another grant that they can achieve when they go through small business training. Now, in addition, there's larger grants when you have substantial improvements to a storefront or to a facility, and those all have to be TIF eligible if it's part of the program. An alternative to that would be the development agreements that come to the city. Now, these programs are continually modified. They can be nimble. Some of you might recall the gallery district that we had some years ago, and that was during the last recession, and that made a big difference for us at the time. We actually did rent subsidies, but we modified those programs when we felt those were no longer needed, that the market had recovered sufficiently. So the current version of these programs are very much in the micro form. These are very small grants, just a fraction of perhaps what we might have been offering during the recession, and that recognizes the increased occupancy in the downtown. We've had, part of the survey that we're doing will be to query people about this, and we do ask participants if they found it helpful. And our idea with the requirement for the small business development counseling is that they do survive, that we see them thrive and grow and retain, and that it not be a failed business. So
I would like to say yesterday I drove US 45 from near O'Hare Airport down to I think it's I can't remember the name. Starts with an M. Yeah, Mantino. I always want to think Martino. He is a state rep, but it's Mantino. And Urbana's downtown compares with the nicest looking communities. I drove through communities that didn't look that good, looked kind of shabby with a lot of signs vying for attention, and then very elegant communities, and I think Urbana looks really good. So that's my 2 cents.
I think it
And
looks
I thank
great.
you for all your efforts and the
Thank you.
efforts of your staff to have this take place, and of course with the support of the city council.
Right. I think downtown looks terrific, and I think the occupancy rates and the new businesses and the vibrancy is something we can all be proud of.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Are there any other reports of officers? Okay. We will move on to new business. The first item is ordinance number 2014-08-074, an ordinance approving a special use permit to allow additions to a church in the R3 single and two-family residential district. And this is for 1407 East Scoville Street, Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses Church.
Thank you. One moment, please. Great. Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses Church is applying for a special use permit to allow 2 additions at 1407 East Scoville. Churches located in the R3 district are required to obtain a special use permit. These additions will provide the appropriate amount of space needed for storage and mechanical units, as well as will allow for the restructuring of public rooms within the church. As part of these additions, internal and external modifications will be completed. These modifications will bring the building up to all applicable codes, improve the structure's energy efficiency, and enhance its aesthetic value. The church was built in 1975 and was annexed into the city as a legal, non-conforming use in 1980. It has never had a special use permit. Now moving on to Exhibit A in the memo. We see that the site is located at the southwest corner of East Scoville Street and South Philo Road. To the north, we find single-family residences. To the west, we find duplexes and single-family residences. To the east, we find commercial uses. I'll zoom in here a little if it helps. And to the south, we have the Philo Road Church of Christ. It's also important to note that 2 blocks to the north on Philo Road, there is St. Matthew's Lutheran Church. Here's a zoning map of the area. The subject property, as well as lots to the north, west, and south, are zoned R3 single and two-family residential. The lots to the east are zoned B3 general business. Moving on to the comprehensive plan. Oh, there we go. We can see that the plan calls for the subject property as well as the area surrounding it to the north, south, and west to be defined by a residential suburban pattern, and the commercial areas to the east are to form a regional business center. One moment, please. The subject lot currently contains a primary church building and a storage shed just to its south, right, as you can see in that top photo. The FAR of the buildings on the lot is 0.16, which is under the maximum of 0.40 allowed. The parking lot currently provides 46 spaces, including 2 ADA accessible spaces, which meets requirements. Exhibit E contains the site plan for the project. There's a 575 square foot addition proposed for the southern portion of the primary church building. And this will allow for the addition of a new storage area and mechanical room, as well as for the expansion of the chancel. This will involve the demolition of the previously described shed. Meanwhile, a 144 square foot portico will be added on the southwest portion of the structure. This will reorient the main entrance of the church to the south and will also allow for the expansion of restrooms, the introduction of a unisex restroom, a baby care room, and the refurbishing of public rooms. These additions will increase the lot's FAR to only 0.17 and represent an additional 719 square feet in area. Now, Exhibit F contains the demolition plan, the new floor plan, and other related architectural sketches such as the elevations. Looking through these, we can see numerous modifications are planned along with these additions, including the refurbishment of public rooms, the reduction of seats in the assembly hall, the improvement of ADA accessibility, the installation of new ductwork, the replacement of the roof, the installation of a brick veneer, and the additions of windows where there currently are none. All changes will meet current mechanical and electrical codes and ensure compliance with ADA accessibility. Changes such as new ductwork will improve energy efficiency, while the external modifications will improve the aesthetic value of the property, as well as cohesion between itself and surrounding residences. Now, if I can just move on to the site photo here, that photo here at the end shows a little bit of the point. Well, these two photos do. As you can see, there's currently vinyl siding on the structure shown in this top photo, while the residences in the area in this bottom photo are more defined by brick or stone. And as you can see in the elevations, the plans for the modifications call for a brick veneer, which will improve cohesion with the surrounding residences and structures. Small blocks and landscaping will be introduced into the parking lot, reducing parking to 43 spaces. And the additional landscaping will match the greenery utilized in other surrounding parking lots. The parking lots will also potentially reduce traffic, while the continued use of the site as a church will provide opportunities for economic activity for the businesses located to the east. As you can see in Exhibit H and the minutes, there is community support for the proposed additions and modifications, as well as for the continued site's use as a church. Moving on to the requirements for a special use permit. 1, the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience at this location. The church has served its members successfully from this site since 1975 and enjoys accessibility from multiple arterial streets. It has become a landmark for the neighborhood, and the proposed additions will provide needed space for its members and its managers, as well as improve its accessibility, cohesion, and energy efficiency. 2, the proposed use is designated, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located or otherwise injurious to the public welfare. Over 4 decades, the church has not created a significant disturbance for neighbors. The proposed additions will only slightly expand its footprint, while the proposed modifications will bring it more in line with surrounding structures. Meanwhile, the continued presence of the church will potentially provide economic activity for surrounding businesses. And lastly, number 3, the proposed use conforms to the applicable regulations and standards of, and preserves the essential character of, the district in which it shall be located, except where such regulations and standards are modified by Section 7-7. The church has become a part of the fabric of the community, while the proposed changes will only improve cohesion between itself and the surrounding area. Moreover, the proposed changes meet all zoning ordinance requirements and only reduce any legal nonconformities that are in existence. On July 24th, the Plan Commission voted 5-0 to approve the requested permit with the condition that the additions will be built according to the plans provided by the applicant. Moreover, the zoning administrator may approve minor changes to the site and building plans as needed to comply with the zoning ordinance. Staff recommends the same. City Council has 3 options in this case, including approval of the special use permit, approval with any conditions deemed appropriate or necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare, or 3, to deny the special use permit. If you approve the permit with conditions, I ask that you articulate those conditions, while if you deny, I ask that you explain why you have done so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
I know the neighbors are very supportive of this, and the church has been a very good neighbor for many years, and these improvements will to the facade will do nothing but improve the neighborhood and surrounding areas. So with that, I'd like to move ordinance number 2014-08-074, which is an ordinance approving a special use permit to allow additions to a church in the R3 single and 2-family residential district, 1407 East Scoville Street, Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses Church.
Motion by Marlin, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion?
Just one.
Dennis?
I guess a question. It looks like in the document here that according to the zoning ordinance, 29 parking spaces are required for a church of 144 seats. We've got a parking lot had been 46 spaces and it's dropping down to 43. That's a significant amount over the necessary. I guess are we dealing now with reduced parking requirements, or I imagine that the parking lot could be a location for future expansion. Do you think there's going to be some expansion in the future? We obviously have more parking than we need.
At the moment, there is no plan for an expansion. The church's congregation has remained stable over the last, roughly, I would say, last decade, and there's no need seen for expansion further than this. In terms of the parking requirement, with verification from staff, the reduction in the number of seats does not translate into a reduction of what's required, and we have so much parking over what is required that lack of parking will not be an issue, while a reduction in seats will potentially actually reduce the amount of traffic that to and from the site.
Libby?
I would just add that our parking requirements really don't equate to demand. It's only one space per 5 seats in a sanctuary, so it doesn't really reflect the actual demand that you might have, particularly in a location which might be drawing from both cities.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion by Marlin, seconded by Smythe. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we have Jeff Engstrom here. Next, we have ordinance number 2014-08-075, an ordinance amending the City of Urbana 2005 Comprehensive Plan, and this is for Active Choices Champaign County Greenways and Trails Plan.
Thank
Okay,
you, Mayor.
Jeff.
Yes, the zoning administrator is requesting that you adopt this plan as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. When the comprehensive plan was first established in 2005, the 2004 version of this plan was a part of it as an agency plan and as a Appendix C, the Greenways and Trails map. An agency plan is an outside plan by an agency from outside the city that affects how the city, or may affect how the city develops over time. And those are generally just acknowledged in the comprehensive plan. But the more important part is the adoption of the proposed future conditions for greenways and trails as a new Appendix C for our comprehensive plan. And I passed out before the meeting tonight. We had a minor change to this exhibit, which has the maps. On Broadway Avenue between Illinois and Washington Streets, it had previously been shown as a bike lane, but that was drawn up before council's recent action, which has changed that designation from a bike lane to a bike route with shared with on-street parking. So the plan contains, it compiles existing conditions and future conditions for greenways and trails throughout the whole county. Much of the plan is just the compilation of those existing and future conditions. It draws heavily from our own comprehensive plan, from various transportation plans within the city that have been approved, including the Bicycle Master Plan, University Corridor Plan, the Boneyard Creek Master Plan, and the Downtown Plan. The plan was based on input from agency staff and from the public in general. A former planner for the city was on the steering committee, Rebecca Bird. And there were at least 4 public meetings. The plan was online for public input for a while. The plan sets a vision for transportation, or for active transportation for the whole county. It has recommended goals and implementation strategies. It has trail design guidelines that the city has adopted. It also has a large list of projects to be implemented in the future. And there's about 5 pages worth of projects listed for Urbana. And those are all taken from existing plans and documents and upcoming plans as well. There's, I think, some from the Urbana Bicycle Master Plan, which will soon be coming before council as well. So that's the background. The plan has already been submitted to the state, and the state has provided some changes that were required. Let's see. And Plan Commission and City Council both reviewed the draft plan in November of 2013 and gave comments which were incorporated. Recently, at July 24th meeting, Plan Commission voted 5-0 to recommend City Council approve the adoption of the plan as an amendment to the comprehensive plan and as Exhibit C with the Greenways and Trails future conditions map for the city. Staff concurs with this recommendation, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
I just have a quick question. Did members of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission participate in this? If it didn't go there formally, did they participate?
Yes, I believe there were some at least some of the meetings I saw.
So is it fair to say that what's in the city of Urbana is our existing plans, and maybe the new stuff would be out in the county?
Yes.
Okay. Charlie?
I spoke with Brandon Bowersox Johnson a little bit ago about this, and it didn't pass through BPAC, and I really think that they should have had a formal look at this plan, because there's some issues in here that need to be discussed. There are also some things in here that may change with the Bicycle Master Plan for Urbana, and I think the two should be in sync. And so I would prefer to hold this for their comments and for for changes made to this that reflect changes that come from the Bike Master Plan process, which is that Bike Master Plan is being updated at this time. There are a couple of things on here that I picked out this time looking at it that I don't think these maps were. I know the maps were out there from the previous version, but there's some issues like with Florida Avenue, Curtis Road, and some stuff to the in the northeast quadrant where I think there's a couple of bike routes that are missing that I think need to be discussed and fleshed out.
Okay, Libby?
I think what we have here is what's described in our comprehensive plan as a system of plans that interrelate, but it's very hard to do the ones that relate simultaneously. And I think in this case, the Greenways and Trails Plan is essentially done and submitted to the state. The benefit of formally adopting it as an element of the comprehensive plan is that it signals to landowners and developers that this is where we want to see these facilities. So it's very helpful, especially as we administer our subdivision and development ordinance, to have the most recent map formally adopted as an element of the comprehensive plan. Similarly, the Bicycle Master Plan should be adopted in that fashion. So we will be amending our comprehensive plan to adopt the Bicycle Master Plan, which will be a more current document and will supersede the alignments that will be corrected. If we wait for one plan to catch up with another, we won't be able to complete the planning schedules, complete the planning documents that are done by others and coordinated countywide. So I think this is our opportunity now to adopt this plan into our comprehensive plan, knowing that we will be modifying it, and in fact have already modified one of the routes.
Okay,
As for
Charlie,
the
you wanna-
bicycle BPAC, I know there have been discussions whether they got a formal recommendation. This has been going on for several months, so that's something we could certainly go back and see if we can do that. So we're past the draft input stage. We're at the point where either we want this formally adopted as part of the comp plan or we don't.
There, if I could
So-
answer that directly.
yeah. Go ahead.
I think the issue is that in November, I brought up the issue of BPAC. I asked that it go there. They should have taken a formal look at this and given feedback in a formal fashion, just as the Plan Commission did. And it bothers me that we have a group of people who are specifically designated for bicycles and bicycle and pedestrian activities, and they weren't consulted in this process. I don't care that it's a matter of keeping a schedule. This should be right. We're coming up with a new bike master plan in a couple months. To me, process wasn't followed correctly, and I hate to delay this, but I think it's more important that we set the record straight and wait a few months if need be to get this better.
Louis?
Just pointing out by state law, the Plan Commission is the body that needs to hold hearings on comprehensive plan amendments, which is why it went to that body for that hearing.
Would it be possible to have things go through the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission before that goes to the Plan Commission?
You know, it really should have, and without having all the staff, November was a signature month in that we lost 3 planners, so maybe a ball got dropped, plus we lost the person on the Public Works side as well.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, that question had occurred to me too, and I was going to ask it. So I guess I know the bicycle master plan is still in the works, and you think it's going to be ready in a couple months. But once it is done, whenever it's done, will that also be incorporated in our comprehensive plan?
That would be my goal, and again, a primary reason being to ensure that we can obtain implementation as we administer the subdivision ordinance. If you show where a bicycle facility is supposed to be or a greenway, you can incorporate it into new development via the subdivision ordinance. The other benefit of having these plans adopted in the comprehensive plan is it ensures a higher probability of obtaining a grant. If it's not in an official plan, then you don't rate as high, so you can't get the dollars. So there's practical reasons to adopt these maps into our comprehensive plan.
So we could look at this as a work in progress. It's already been submitted to the state, but it could be revised.
Yes, it's like the LRTP. Just when you thought you were done with it, it comes back again. So we can do that, and we certainly would include the BPAC all the way through.
Okay. Anyone else? Mike?
Well, I have a different issue, and it's not necessarily a city issue. Having grown up as a farm boy, in my family, having farmed in southern Champaign County for generations, railroad right-of-ways. When the railroads acquired the property from the landowners at the time, it's clearly stated in the abstracts that once the railroad right-of-ways were abandoned, that right-of-way would cede back to the rightful owner. The state, subsequently, in their infinite wisdom, in the Rails to Trails program, has made efforts to supersede that longstanding standard that if a railroad right-of-way were to be abandoned, that it would go back to the landowners. So that's my whole problem with this. To me, it's a property rights issue. It's something that was it's a trust that was broken. So I'm not saying I'm not going to support this because I think it's also important for developers to understand what they are looking at when they're looking to develop a piece of property. But I just wanted to use this opportunity to point out that it doesn't matter to me if it was 4 or 5 generations ago. My family still owns that property, and we're out dozens of acres based on the Missouri Pacific, which goes through Broadlands and Longview. Interestingly, not on this map, but it's abandoned. And that property will never go back to my family, which is the rightful owners. So I do have a philosophical problem with this from that perspective, but I'm not going to necessarily let that stand in the way of supporting this.
Eric.
So I understand Charlie's concern about the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, but since it appears that no flexibility will be lost with respect to completely incorporating their input in due course as they deliberate and respond to this, I would be willing to support moving forward with it now.
I think we need a motion in a second. No one's made that yet, right?
So I'll move approval of this agenda item.
Okay,
Second.
motion by Jacobson, seconded by Marlin. Any other discussion?
One.
Dennis?
Yeah, just in looking through it, and it has to do with the correction that's already been made by by community development about the dotted line marking and the color for the Broadway thoroughfare. There's the two blocks that we, by ordinance in May, set aside as a shared route rather than a bike lane dedicated. As part of that, on page 200 of Exhibit B, which is your list of active conditions, future conditions, and active choices, it's a grid that explains site of the various roads, the terminus of the various routes, which would be, in this case, UR-HP-04, indicated on Broadway Avenue, terminus on the north, Illinois Avenue, on the south, Washington. Under the 2 columns saying priority and time frame, I would think that because of our ordinance change and our working with the community and the residents on that block, that we'd have to probably change the designation from high priority and high time frame to low, because we've already made that decision a couple months ago, and it's probably not going to be evolving or changing, maybe for the next 5 years until maybe another plan gets reevaluated. So I wouldn't call that a high priority for making into a bike lane, because we've already made the decision. It's not going to be one right now.
Charlie?
And here's what's bothering me with all this. Supposedly, this was submitted to the state, and it's final, and yet we can make a tiny little change here just like that. And it strikes me that BPAC can have a look at this and suggest some changes in a very quick fashion. And so I'm going to be voting against this, because I think that we can wait a month and be much more consistent than acting tonight.
Anyone else?
Can I ask Charlie?
Sure.
Charlie, so did you say that you were going to wait until the bike plan would be coming through and approved in November?
I don't know what their schedule is at the moment. I didn't ask Brandon.
Because right now we're in August.
Yeah, I don't know. Bill, do you know when it's due? September. So we're literally, BPAC's going to be looking at this very shortly, and looking at, or BPAC could look at this and look at the bicycle master plan, get some more refinements to this. And if we in fact can make this change here that's been done today, based on your email, I had it circled as well to bring up tonight. It's gotten changed. I don't see why we have to act on this tonight. I think we should send this to BPAC and let them give us some feedback and do it with the bicycle and approve both this and the bicycle master plan together at the same time.
Diane?
Well, is there a specific negative impact of us waiting for a few weeks till we get the BPAC input? I mean, is there a downside to not passing it tonight?
I think there's going to be two versions of the document. I think what state has these inconsistencies or errors, correct, and perhaps we can modify our ordinance adopting it, adopt a different version of the maps. I think the ship has sailed on this official version of the Greenways Trail for the whole county. And again, the action, whether it's tonight or September, is that we adopt it perhaps as amended or as we want to modify it so that it can be an element of our comprehensive plan. That's a staff request. And Jeff, can you think of a reason why that would be different tonight versus in another month?
I don't think there's a difference, no.
So will we be changing things without changing what's on file in the state?
Yes, so the document was officially submitted to the state a couple months ago, and they had gotten our comments in November. There was it was put on review in December last year, but the official version was submitted to the state, and they finally got the comments back from the state.
So when was the official version submitted to the state?
I think it was due at the end of the year.
Oh, so this is a long time ago that it was
Yes.
filed.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, well, I believe we have a motion. Beg your pardon? Motion? Yeah, so we have a motion.
I would urge people to vote against it, and then we'll do another motion.
Okay, well, let's,
I just
Diane.
I'm just getting more confused the more I hear this. What will be the most useful to the city to use with future developers and subdivision folks? I mean, does it matter?
Yeah. The bike plan that will be adopting soon will be more useful. It'll be more
The
fine-grained.
corrected bike plan.
Yes. And this is really just a compilation of all the existing plans. The actual bike plan that we adopt, that we've been going through for the last year, is what we will be sharing with developers to make sure they're consistent with when they do subdivision applications.
Rather than this particular set of maps that we have tonight.
Yes.
Carol.
This is a broader document. This has
No, I
greenways and
understand that. I
trails,
just wanted what's
in
most.
addition to bicycle facilities.
Right.
I just wanted to ask Charlie a question. Just to clarify that your objection is not necessarily what is or is not in this plan. Your objection is that it didn't go to the advisory committee first.
Yeah, I thought in November that I asked that it go to the advisory committee, and I suspect that with the loss of Rebecca Bird, it got dropped. There are some aspects in here that I expected to have been fixed by BPAC that are still in here. There are things that I just think are wrong from a bicyclist point of view. And I hate to adopt something now that in a month is going to get changed and have both things sitting out there in confusion. So I much prefer to wait a month, have our version of this corrected by BPAC and us before it's adopted, so that we have one bicycle master plan essentially. I know there's the additional greenway stuff in here,
So if I can just clarify.
Yeah, so I just think we should have one single. We shouldn't confuse the comprehensive plan with two bicycle plans.
So I just wanted to clarify what Charlie wants. the, or maybe Libby, I'm not sure. So even if this went to, which is to deal with the bike aspect of this plan, because that's the part that you're objecting to, even if this went to the advisory committee, would it have to then go back to the plan commission that has approved this map that we currently have?
Well, I think ideally, the way it would work is you would get input, because we have this with historic preservation sometimes too, and zoning board. You get input from all the affected boards and commissions, and I'm certain that they were all invited to the many different public forums, but ideally you go as well to their meetings. That's important to have it on their agenda. They provide input to the plan commission, which is by state law and by our practice, the hearing body for the comprehensive plan. And then that's the exercise that we're doing belatedly here to make sure that this map then gets replaced in our comprehensive plan, because what we have is a 2004 Greenways and Trails plan. Now, again, it's a system of plans. We have one plan that shows bicycle facilities. It's a much more detailed, robust plan, and we're in the process of updating that. We have this more generic plan for the whole county that we piggyback onto that deals with a larger category of like recreational types of uses in addition, called greenways. And my interest, in addition to making sure all the right people see it, is that we feed that into our official documents so that we have the best standing, whether we're looking at a greenway connection between parks or a bike route or a bike lane, you name it, and that we would go with the most recent, most pertinent document. So I don't know if that helps to explain it. I do think that with the time delay between when the work was completed and with the formal adoption, it's difficult because circumstances change. And I don't have a good answer for that other than an apology that it's taken this long.
Eric?
So the reason that I will intend to vote to support this motion is that during this interim period before the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee weighs in formally with its input, our master plan that we are working with, that we can show prospective developers, will be more correct than the one that you can show now. It may not be all the way there, but it'll be better than it is now. And so it seems to me that, now that we understand that this is at least for a little while more, a work in progress, at least our working document should show the greatest measure of progress that, and the most current information that can possibly be shown to developers during this period.
Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Sammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
No.
Mr. Smythe?
No.
Looks to me like it failed. So, is there another motion?
I move to send this to the to BPAC at their next meeting for comments and corrections before it gets brought back to us.
Stop.
Is there a second to the
Would that-
motion? He made a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Madigan, who now wants to speak.
Would an appropriate motion maybe be to defer this to committee of the whole while that happens? Or is it just staying here?
Yeah, actually, you're right. That's probably good. Yeah.
So I would
So
move to amend.
I accept that as a friendly
Okay.
amendment.
Okay, we have a motion to defer this, or to keep this in, or send it to the committee of the whole. And that is made by Smythe and seconded by Madigan. And, well, yes, and send it to BPAC. Keep it in the committee of the whole until we hear back from BPAC. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
No.
All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. All right, thank you. Ordinance number 2014-08-076, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana, Illinois, revising Article 2 and Article 5 to establish definitions and use provisions for medical cannabis dispensaries and medical cannabis cultivation facilities. Yes.
Good evening.
Would you say your name, please?
Yes, I'm Kevin Garcia. I'm a
Okay.
planner too.
I've seen you before, but I've been away in another world.
This will be my second presentation, so I consider myself a seasoned veteran now.
Okay.
So, the zoning administrator is requesting an amendment to a couple of sections of the zoning ordinance to add definitions and establish use provisions for medical cannabis dispensaries and cultivation centers. On January 1st of this year, the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Program Act, I'll refer to it as the Act from now on, took effect, making Illinois the 20th state to legalize cannabis for medical use by qualifying patients. The Act also established regulations for cultivation, distribution, and use of medical cannabis, and it provides definitions and citing rules for medical cannabis uses. Now, since the passage of that act, the city has been directly contacted by a number of parties that are interested in Urbana as a potential location for medical cannabis facilities. Now, since prior to the act, cannabis was not legal in Illinois for medical use, we didn't have any medical cannabis uses in our zoning ordinance, not surprisingly. So what we've had to do is we've provided some general guidance based on the state's rules and based on the assumption that we would treat these facilities like similar uses within the city. And this approach is consistent with the zoning ordinance, which states that if a use is proposed that is not currently in the zoning ordinance, that such use shall be subject to the regulations of the use to which it is most related or similar as determined by the zoning administrator. So we'd been using that approach, but the zoning administrator and staff found this approach to be lacking, mainly due to the unique characteristics surrounding medical cannabis uses that the state has put forth in the act. So we are proposing, or the zoning administrator is requesting this text amendment to add, to establish specific uses and guidelines for such facilities within the city of Urbana. Now, this matter went to the Urbana Plan Commission at their July 24th meeting, and by a vote of 5 ayes and 0 nays, they recommended approval and forwarded this on to the City Council with one very minor change. It was the deletion of two letters, the word "on," of the proposed text amendment. So a little bit more about the Act, just as background. Is that the Act made it makes it legal for qualifying patients to obtain medical cannabis to treat their medical conditions. Now, the state is very strict in relation to other states that have passed similar laws, and there are only just under 40 different serious medical conditions. They call them debilitating medical conditions that a patient must have in order to apply for and then obtain a registration card from the Illinois Department of Public Health before they can actually begin using medical cannabis. And now these are, as I said, these are debilitating medical conditions. So these are things like multiple sclerosis, ALS, it's known as Lou Gehrig's disease, cancer, glaucoma, HIV, AIDS. These are serious conditions. The Act further defines, in addition to who can use medical cannabis, they define how medical cannabis can be cultivated and sold, how many cultivation and dispensing locations are allowed in the state, and they break it down by state police district, and then where such facilities can be located within the state. Now, medical cannabis, according to the Act, can only be produced by cultivation centers, which are registered by the Department of Agriculture, and only 21 are allowed within the state. It's one per state police district, and that's just done so that the state police can police this more effectively. Now, with respect to dispensary organizations, they will allow 60 in the state, and this is, and these are allocated based on population. There will be, let's see, in the state police district that Urbana is in, it's District 10. There are 9 counties, and the number of dispensaries here will only be 2. Now, the Act also provides for citing requirements, minimum citing requirements for locating medical cannabis facilities in relation to sensitive populations. And in this case, it's talking about preschools and daycares, so keeping these away from children. I'll just read this. Registered cultivation center may not be located within 2,500 feet of the property line of pre-existing schools or daycare centers or areas zoned for residential use. With regard to dispensaries, they may not be located within 1,000 feet of a pre-existing school or daycare, or in an area zoned for residential use, or in a house, apartment, or condominium, which could be in any different zone. Now, on page 3 of your council memo, you'll see a table that we put together. It's not exhaustive, but it shows where how other municipalities within the state have considered allowing medical cannabis uses within their cities. So they range from pretty restrictive in the case of cities such as Bartlett to a lot more permissive, such as Lake County. As I said, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just illustrative of what some others are doing. Now, as I mentioned, since these uses didn't exist before the first of the year, we haven't been able to have specific regulations. And so we've been relying on, up to now, treating these uses as the most similar use within our zoning ordinance. Now, with respect to cultivation centers, the two most closely related uses would be chemicals and allied product manufacturing, which is a highly intensive use, and confectionery products manufacturing and packaging, which is a bit less intensive a use than a cultivation center would be. So really, cultivation centers fall somewhere in between these two uses, so neither of them are really good proxies for how we should treat medical cannabis cultivation centers. Now, in addition, the state has put these regulations in place through the Act that require these specific citing, or that have these specific citing requirements that I just mentioned. So cultivation centers have to be 2,500 feet from these sensitive uses, and that's not with respect to other uses in the zoning ordinance. There's nothing that has to abide by those rules. So given these factors, we're proposing to allow medical cannabis cultivation centers as a permitted use in the heavy industrial areas, the IN2, as a special use in the IN1 light industrial districts, and as a conditional use in the AG agricultural districts. Now, if you'll turn to Exhibit A of your council memo, which I can pull up on here as well, you'll see that there are only a handful of properties within the city that would qualify under the proposed text amendment here. And those are all in the IN2 heavy industrial portion up on North Lincoln Avenue, and actually a couple over on North Shore Drive as well. So with the proposed zoning amendment here, there would be, like I said, just a handful of places where these could be located. Now, with respect to dispensaries, the closest use in the current zoning ordinance, it would be a drugstore, and those are pretty similar to cannabis dispensaries in that they're places that people go to pick up prescriptions and to get advice about medication from licensed medical professionals. However, as in the case with medical cannabis cultivation centers, dispensaries also have specific siting rules by the state. So they have to be located 1,000 feet of the property line of the sensitive uses, such as schools and daycares. And drugstores are not subject to those same siting requirements. Also, in addition, drugstores, you can generally find products in addition to prescription drugs. In relation to cannabis dispensaries, they exist for just the one purpose, which is to take medical cannabis and related materials from licensed cultivation centers and then dispense those to qualifying patients. So it's a very specific use. And again, the zoning administrator and staff find it not to be a good proxy we don't find drugstores to be a good proxy for medical cannabis dispensaries. So on Exhibit B, we have another map which shows that there are slightly more, or quite a few, not slightly more, but quite a few more locations where dispensaries could be located, just given the smaller buffer size, if you will, of surrounding the sensitive uses. So you've got areas up on North Cunningham, north of I-74. You've got areas around North Lincoln and I-74. You've got areas downtown. And you've got some areas out east, some to the southeast, and then a smattering sort of through town. Now, briefly, with respect to the comprehensive plan, staff believes that adding these uses to the Urbana zoning ordinance would meet at least a few of the goals of the comprehensive plan. The first one is to minimize incompatible uses or land uses, which is really what the state siting guidelines and then also what by the siting guidelines we're proposing would achieve. It would keep these uses away from sensitive uses. That's goal 17 in the comp plan. Goal 28 is to develop a diversified and broad stable tax base. Now, medical cannabis is being treated by the state as a pharmaceutical drug, so it would be subject to a 1% pharmaceutical tax. In addition, for medical cannabis paraphernalia, it would be subject to the regular 6.25% retail sales tax. Also, goal 29 is to develop a focused approach to economic development, and specifically under that goal is an objective 29.2 that talks about strengthening Urbana's standing as a regional healthcare center. Now, in the entire 9-county region, which has over 500,000 people, there would only be 2 dispensaries allowed and 1 cultivation center allowed. So if we were to have 1 or more of those uses in town, it would certainly, we feel, strengthen Urbana's role as a regional healthcare center. Now, the proposed text amendment is on page 6 of your packet. If you'd care to look through that, I'm sure you all have read through that. Or did I say page 8? I meant page whatever is after 8, page 1 it says, but that's the page after 8, sorry. So there are 3 options that you can take with regard to this plan case. You can either approve the ordinance as the ordinance amendment, you can approve the amendment with specific changes, or you can deny the proposed amendment. As I mentioned, on July 24th, the Plan Commission recommended approval by a vote of 5-0, and staff would also recommend approval. I will field any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Bill?
Just on the paraphernalia, would they also need a permit? The same would you also need a permit to buy the paraphernalia, or could anybody? Is this gonna be? Would this be a retail operation that anyone could walk in?
No,
off the street?
no, it would be specifically for registered patients.
Thanks.
Dennis.
This is, involves maybe a question for legal, I guess, so maybe Jim Simon might be able to help me on this one too, but maybe you can also comment on it. Exhibit C talks about the condition or the question of how to deal with employee impairment if anybody is working, at some job and they're taking this as a medication and they're in the workplace. It also talks about, as a police matter, driving under the impairment. So these are things that maybe the city itself should be aware of a little bit. And it says that there is no, quoting from the impairment at the workplace text that's in Exhibit C, which is an IML legal brief, quote, common questions concerning medical cannabis by Brian Day, the state attorney. He quotes that there is no objective standard for measuring cannabis impairment. That's one thing. And then he says, municipalities should evaluate their existing employment policies with respect to drug use and possession. If a written policy is not currently in place or should be enacted or incorporated into the appropriate personal rules. So as we go forward, and I'm feeling that we're probably going to be adopting this with maybe one change or two changes, I don't know, but I'm concerned about the suggestion and the recommendation that there be a review of the municipal employee policy. So are we going to be including that as part of this, or would this be coming sometime after we adopt?
I'm not sure where Vasily is at, if at all. She has not contacted me. Michelle would probably be working on it. But this whole issue of medical marijuana usage or effect in the workplace is a very hot issue currently in employment law circles. In part because, unlike alcohol, it is virtually, from what I've been told, and I've not read studies on it, but I've been told, it's virtually impossible to detect that somebody, in fact, from an objective standpoint, like a breathalyzer test and all, and the testing of marijuana on a user, I guess it dissipates fast enough in the body that by the time, unless you right then and there test. I think where the employment area is heading is to be treating this use by employees separate from the whole dispensary, cultivation center issues, which really are completely separate issues, but it can have an impact on employment, is to treat it like any other medication abuse or medication use. Obviously, we would be very concerned about the safety of our employees who might be operating heavy equipment or vehicles under the influence. So obviously, department heads, division heads, once a policy is established, are going to have to pay very particular attention if they find out or come to know that an employee is a user under prescription. And they're going to have to be somewhat trained in how to observe behavior out of the ordinary from a particular employee. The statute doesn't address how cities or employers, for that matter, deal with the employment issue. But cities are and other employers are beginning to develop policies. So I'm sure we're going down that road. If we haven't started already with Michelle, I've attended several conferences, Michelle being my assistant city attorney, working with Vasily. I've attended a couple of conferences where this has been a hot topic. But right now, as far as I know, nothing specific is ready to be published as far as a city policy.
And so there doesn't become a complexity for this discussion, at least tonight.
Say that again?
This doesn't become then a complexity for the location and the approval of a site for distribution.
The location and the approval have nothing to do with whether an employee is going to use it. If it's wherever this facility or these facilities are located, if an employee who fits the category, the 40-plus conditions that allow for the prescribing of medical cannabis, if a doctor chooses to prescribe it and the patient chooses to use it, that patient could be an employee of any one of our businesses or, for that matter, the city, wherever they get it from.
Isn't there a long delay before the first dispensary would even open?
Yeah, that's correct. And I was going to point out, as we heard in the presentation earlier on this topic, it would be, we're looking at sometime, at best, we'd be looking at early 2015 would be the first time that anything would be rolling out. More realistically, it would probably be middle of next year. So I think there's some time to deal with that issue separately.
And the person would be able to get it at a dispensary any place in Illinois if we don't have one here. So employers are just going to have to deal with this. Diane?
Just a clarification, in reading some of the material from the state, one of the provisions in the state law was that there be a geographic distribution of these facilities. So there's no, and District 10 can have 2, but there's no way that Urbana, that 2 could be cited within one city. Is there, based on that state law?
There's nothing that we've read in the state's language that says that they couldn't, two couldn't be located in the same city. It's just they distribute them geographically based on police district and population of that police district. So
but
there
it would
could
be unlikely they'd approve 2 for the same city.
I can't speak for the state. That might be a reasonable assumption to make,
All
though.
right.
Carol?
I just wanted to, you mentioned earlier about trying to figure out how to regulate the dispensary or categorize it, and you said the dispensary is categorized as a pharmaceutical company. Is there a requirement of licensing for people who actually work in the dispensary, like a pharmaceutical company?
They have to, I'm not entirely certain since I'm not an expert on this, but employees do have to pass some sort of muster. I'm not sure exactly how I guess, what qualifications they need to have. I think that you have to be a licensed pharmacist, but I'm not entirely sure about that.
Could our guest
If
answer
you're,
that
if
question?
you're if you're actually dispensing, we might be able to, if we still have anybody from the
He's
industry.
sitting right behind you, actually.
He might be able to answer that after this presentation.
Does he have another presentation?
Okay, do you want to come up
Yeah, you
and
can
help
just
answer
answer.
questions? Sure.
I heard many questions, so. What was the question specifically?
Just if the employees, like a pharmacy, if we're regulating and zoning this as a pharmacy, like in a pharmacy, the employees have to have a license?
No.
No requirement?
We sought out a pharmacist to be part of our team in order to, the gentleman that we're working with, Ender, he has 28 years of patient care experience. So we wanted to bring that kind of experience to the table, but it is not a requirement.
It's not a requirement of licensing. And then the second question, I'll just say as a pre-statement to my statement, that I believe on the state level, of course, we need to deal with it statewide, and I support medical use as well as for the state to move in the way that Colorado has done in California. I don't believe its current, the way we currently will enact this will address the revenue issues and things other states will have. So it won't be based on revenue that this is being done. But I do want to ask, some of the things that I've followed this issue in, like Colorado and California, is how you prevent people who are not necessarily state licensed to distribute like any other pharmaceutical company, prevent them from going on the underground market, which we've seen this happening out of Colorado, moving to other states, because they are not, of course, states where you can have cultivation and dispensaries. How do you prevent that from happening?
Basically to prevent diversion from Illinois to going to another state. Well, currently the way the act is written, patients can only purchase 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks. So we're not talking about, commercial level where you're going to have guys with 50 pounds in their trunk driving across state lines. I mean, it would just, you'd have to have 100 people working for you going to the dispensaries every week. So that the way the ordinance or the way the act is written currently, I just don't see that happening. When things go recreational, if they do go recreational, that could change. In Colorado, an in-state resident can buy an ounce per visit. and there's not really a lot of guidance on, how many times they can come per day, what's a visit. So that would become more of an issue. The point of sale system that we use, MJ Freeway, they just started implementing a new system where everyone that uses their point of sale system is all networked now. So when you come in with your medical card, we can see where you've been and what you've purchased elsewhere.
And I'll just add to that, the state regulations are very strict in terms of controlling and monitoring how much people are getting each time they're purchasing. It's all logged. So it's really strict, and it's a lot stricter than other states, from my understanding.
Okay, Charlie and then Bill.
It's also my understanding that the employees are fairly tightly monitored as well. There's videotaping, inventory control, so it's much like a pharmacy in that aspect, right?
The employees do have to go through a background check process, but it's not like they don't have to be licensed pharmacists per se. So yes, they do have to go through a vetting process with the state.
Okay. Yeah, so my question is for Kevin here. The table you provided on page 3 is really useful, the comparison what other communities are doing around the state, and it's a mixed bag here, and I think I understand where you were going because you tried to give some good examples here. I understand the conditional use of, let's look at cultivation centers.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the conditional use for agriculture because of how you've described it. I'm trying to picture why we'd want to do special use in the light industrial. What makes this more than light industrial here?
Libby, do you want to help field this question, or Jeff? I think they can, since they understand the special use permitting process a bit more than I do.
I think the thought there has to do with the very wide range of uses that are allowed in light industrial office, and just the potential for potential conflicts to occur, that we felt that extra level of review would help with that. Now, typical industrial park, we don't feel that you would need that type of review, but you'll recall that we modernized our light industrial to include a lot of office and other uses and some retail uses. So that's why for a cultivation center, we thought there should be that review. Really is a much more intensive type of use.
It's because our light industrial is so wide.
So broad, exactly.
Okay, so we want to be careful. Okay, so some places, okay, now I understand that. Okay, so then similarly, why wouldn't we want some of that same review on some of the dispensary locations? Is it real? We have B3-4 and IN, the light industrial by right, with no review.
And the dispensaries are much more of a typical business type of use. I think we saw some good photographs. They would fit in a lot of retail and office uses. They don't have a lot of the truck traffic. They're not very large uses. They're not, large contained factories almost, which the cultivation centers would be. So we felt that they were more analogous to a pharmacy or a medical clinic type of use than other uses in the table of uses. So just for consistency within the table of uses, we did limit them to just the 3 zones. The general business, we kept them away from the mixed-use zones, we kept them away from neighborhood business, but we felt that they would fit very squarely within those central business, general business, and light industrial zones.
Bill?
Yeah, I did have a question that you might be able to answer on how the prices are set. It's my understanding that it's going to be market-based, so with the growing centers, do they have any limits how much they can grow? Are they no capacity limitations? So there's no capacity limitations. So it's completely market based. They can grow as much as the market will absorb.
And just to give you a frame of reference, in Colorado, we're limited by plant count. Is how they limit us, but there's no such provision in Illinois.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this seems pretty reasonable to me. I think transportation would be an important aspect to consider, since a lot of these people probably aren't able to drive, be able to take the bus or walk, or I guess you can have a designated buyer. In Illinois, you can specify one person
Caregiver.
to be your designated buyer, and they can't buy for anyone else. They would be your only.
The thought there is that
I forget what they
actually-
call it. They don't call them designated buyer. That was
Yeah.
my term.
They call it a
Caregiver,
caregiver.
yeah.
So you're actually, caring for that person because they are so debilitated. is the
Right.
idea.
Okay. So those people could drive. So maybe some interstate access would be good. So yeah, I don't think that was my only question. Thanks.
Diane?
I had a question, then a comment. What is a typical purchase cost? I mean, if someone walks in and buys 2.5 ounces, which they can do every 2 weeks, what are they spending?
In Colorado, the Department of Revenue just did a very exhaustive market study on, what percentage of the population are customers, what percentage of that customer base is, what are they buying? For example, 30% of our customers are buying 70% of our product in Colorado. They did a market analysis to see how much was actually being produced in the entire state, which was 330 metric tons. The average price, I believe, was $320 an ounce in the mountains where we're located in Steamboat. We cater to the tourists. And down in Denver, I believe it was $220 an ounce average. I'd be happy to give you a link to that study.
Is that what you expect in Illinois?
Yes. Oh, sorry, that's my phone.
Okay.
I will point out, though, that with respect to Colorado, since Colorado has legalized cannabis for recreational use, we have to keep in mind that the Illinois State Act is very restrictive. I can't stress that enough, how restrictive the act in Illinois is, and very controlled.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah.
Add to that, 95% of our patients in Colorado are associated with pain, insomnia, or anxiety. And none of those conditions are included. 95% of our medical patients. On top of that, 9 out of every 10 purchases in Colorado is still a medical purchase. It is not a recreational purchase. The state is currently trying to kind of weed out these quasi-patients so that they do go to the recreational side because the state gets 25% surtax.
I wanted to ask you,
Okay.
would you be open 5 days a week or 6 days a week?
We would probably be open 7 days a week.
7 days a week?
We're required by the act, I believe we have to be open 5 days a week.
Okay, because I did a little calculation. 260 days a year, if it's 5 days a week, and if you have 50 patients a day, that would be 13,000 patients a year. And you were talking about 500 to 700.
That would be the same patients coming back to get, just like you would get a
I
prescription.
know, but 50 a day still works out to 13,000 visits.
50 a day times 7 days a week is 350, and if those folks can come every 2 weeks, so that's how you're getting that 17,000. So that's
Well,
those
I got
same
13,000 just doing 5 days a week, but, so that's how many visitors you have.
That's
and
how
if
many
you're-
visits,
Yeah,
not
how many
necessarily
visits.
visitors.
You want to call it visits.
Correct.
So then if you divide it by, 2.5 weeks, or you say 2 a month or something like that, then you could divide by maybe 24. So I don't see how you got the 700 is what I'm saying.
Well, I can tell you how we did it.
Okay.
But again, I think you're focusing on the number of visits and not necessarily
Well,
the
I'm
fact
trying
that
to
those are
adjust
the-
it by how many times they can come.
Okay.
To get it down to how many individual people.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just not following you, but I'll explain how we came up
Yeah,
with that
okay,
number.
that'd be good.
We are projecting 15 to 20,000 patients. We're on all of our projections, we're sticking with the low side to be conservative, so we're figuring about 15,000 patients. We divided that by the 60 dispensaries because they are geographically spread out to be about they're supposed to serve or intended to serve about 500,000 people, or excuse me, 250,000 people each. So we took that 15,000 patient count, divided it by 61, very simple, and we did bump it up very slightly, just considering that this is a medical hub, and that assuming that more folks might be coming here than they would to, say Decatur.
Okay. Diane?
Okay, I'm going to focus on the zoning. Like Charlie, I had concerns about allowing these by right in B3 and B4. I'm fine with the light industrial and fine with the cultivation center categories. But if you look at the map, the possible sites are scattered throughout the city, and there are certain areas where I would hesitate to put a facility like this. And we recently changed our liquor license ordinance to allow us to have council review for each and every liquor license that is approved in order for us to consider neighborhood context. And I think that minimal level of review would be appropriate for dispensary as well, particularly since you're looking at buildings that are going to be where windows will be blacked out or boarded up or bricked in, and I think that has an impact on neighborhoods. Plus it's not quite a drugstore and it's not quite a liquor store. It's a completely new business for this city and for this state, and whether you'll be operating it or someone else will be operating it, we really haven't had no experience with any of these people operating these businesses. So I would like, and I think I will be proposing to amend this to require a special use permit for dispensaries in the B3 and B4 zones. I just think that little additional review and ability to take into account neighborhood context is very important for this particular thing.
Well, to equate them or to view these dispensaries as similar to liquor stores, we don't feel is really all that accurate, because liquor stores.
I'm not saying they're equivalent. I'm just saying we had that similar sort of review because of the residents' concerns, not necessarily because they're living next to one of these, but the community's interested. So I'm not equating them to a liquor store or to a drugstore, but I just think that having that extra level of review would not be inappropriate at all in this case. And if you look at these other communities, the proposal that Urbana that we have before us is actually fairly permissive compared to some of the other communities. So to move to a little bit more review, I don't think would be terrible.
Sure.
If you do go with a special use permit, unfortunately, Urbana is a little behind the game. You can see a lot of these communities have this in place. We're anticipating that the applications are going to be starting to be accepted in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we only have a 2-week window to get that application in. If you require a special use permit, we're going to have that special use permit in hand when we apply, and it would very likely preclude Urbana from participating as having a dispensary.
Well, how do these other communities then?
They just, they've done this a long time ago, and some of these folks have buttoned up a location and have already gone through the special use permit process.
Have you selected, you said a specific location has been identified?
Yeah, it's in your packet that I handed out.
And that's the only location you're considering?
It's the location that we have placed an offer on the building.
Were you directed to that location?
No, we did a similar analysis ourselves, and that particular area just seemed the most attractive to us. And there were we've looked at 2 buildings, and that was the one that we favored.
Can I just follow that up with a quick question?
Sure.
So do you require a storefront on a heavily traveled street for this kind of business?
No, we're sought out. We'd be the only
Right.
game in town, so, I mean, people would find us. We don't, and that's
Yeah.
why we don't have street signs. at
Because
ours.
the Corkscrew location is, that's a storefront on a heavily, I mean, there's a Starbucks right across the street. So that's a location that is, while the business there unfortunately did not work out, it's a nice business location for someone who does desire a storefront.
It is.
And we have, unfortunately, lots and lots of vacancy that's not necessarily storefront. So maybe the whole special use thing could be avoided for now if there would be a couple of other properties under consideration that might not be a fairly attractive storefront on a heavily traveled street in town.
Yeah. Again, well, let me backpedal a little bit. This program is only going to be in place for the next 2.5 years. So there are a lot of questions. If things go recreational, are they going to open up more licenses? Will we have competition? If they decide that the existing dispensaries aren't able to meet the demand, will they open it up to more dispensaries, in which case we would have competition. So there's just a lot of unknowns out there. Again, we didn't pick that spot to be obnoxious, if you will. You saw our storefront in Steamboat, but it just was the most attractive to us from a business standpoint.
I don't view your storefront as obnoxious at all. I just was curious. I mean, put yourself in our shoes.
No, yeah, no, absolutely. And I didn't. That was probably not the right
we're
word.
trying to attract business to town, and if that fills up if you take up a storefront that you don't need because you're a destination business. I see benefit to potentially looking elsewhere. I mean, Lincoln Square over here, all kinds of space in there would be a great spot, in my opinion.
Except it's excluded by the state law. No, because it's too close to a mall, to a daycare.
Could I just,
Go ahead.
could I speak to your point really quickly? So the maps that we put together and the maps that you see just show the properties that have the zoning classifications that we're proposing and that are located outside of these buffer zones from daycares and schools. If we were to look at this map and also overlay the list of, or the parcels that are actually available and that meet the requirements, having an existing building of at least however many, 4,000 square feet or more, this map would shrink the potential locations significantly. And I assume that you and that the other parties that are interested in dispensaries in Urbana have probably put in quite a bit of due diligence in selecting some locations that meet all of the criteria that we're proposing.
Okay, Carol Ammons has a question.
I think what has, I support your dispensary and the cultivation, but I don't support the assumption that this wonderful gentleman is going to be the one has getting a license and Urbana should support. All of these have been precluded in some way, all the way down to the site location and us meeting the time frame of the business owner as opposed to finding an ordinance that fits the needs of Urbana. And so I'm a little concerned about that. I would not support the city council writing a letter of support. I think it needs to be open and free and without influence and political games that will come at the state level for license issuing, and I know he knows what I'm talking about. So I think we need to be careful about that. And I would think that you would want to be closer to the hospital. I guess I don't understand the location selection either. And then finally, nothing to do with you, but the whole issue in the state, and I agree that the state needs to look at its the act itself, and more than not, they need to adjust it, because on one hand you have these legal uses of marijuana, on another hand you have a whole population of folks who's going to prison for marijuana, and I think that there's a a huge contradiction there, and the state needs to look at that and not put communities like ours in this situation, so that we have to approve one legal use and disapprove another, and make one a criminal matter and one an entrepreneur matter. And so I just think we should not get into the business of writing letters of support and things of that nature for these.
Charlie?
I'd like to get at least a motion on the floor here. I move ordinance number 2014-876, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana, Illinois, revising Article 2 and Article 5 to establish definitions and use provisions for medical cannabis dispensaries and medical cannabis cultivation facilities. Plan Commission case number 2234T14.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Smythe and a second by Ammons. Diane.
Can I go back to something you said? You said you're looking, this has a sunset provision in 2018, so are we realistically looking at 2.5 years and that's it? Or the whole landscape can change?
We're projecting in the next 2 years that the whole landscape's going to change. Either they're going to add add pain, anxiety, and
I suspect that'll happen.
And that would increase the patient counts dramatically, or it could go full recreational as it has in Colorado and Washington, which would obviously drastically change that.
Well, and the state is also considering broadening or loosening the guidelines for restrictions on locations and allowing them in mixed business residential, according to the Illinois Municipal League. So
I hadn't heard anything about that.
So that could change the landscape as well, unless you know something more.
Well, the actual language of the administrative rules that came out on July 15th, in there on a thorough reading by staff, we found that what we're proposing is actually a bit more restrictive than what the state is allowing. The state actually does allow, they would allow, by their rules, they would allow this in like the MOR district or in some of those districts that are mixed use.
They already
will? The
Oh.
state actually is explicit that it's only excluded from residentially zoned, like ones that are something.
So they already did it, okay.
Yeah.
Eric.
So I think that we should keep our head no matter what others do. And the issue here really is or in my mind at least, is should we treat medical marijuana like any other prescription medication to the extent that that's possible under the existing state law. And I think we should. We don't have we don't consider explicitly issues of in our employment practices. We don't consider explicitly issues of whether an employee's performance might be impaired by another psychoactive prescription drug. If we were to consider this for marijuana, we should consider it for all. I may be wrong. The city attorney is looking at me as though maybe there's something I said that might not be quite right. But in any case, I don't think we should have require dispensaries to go through a special use permitting project any more than we should consider a drugstore to do so. In any case, on this ordinance, we're not talking about now about supporting any particular business, any particular business or applicant, but I think we should be open to vetting applicants and supporting their application, because I think on balance it would be a good thing for this community for one of the dispensaries in our area to be permitted here. So if we should decide that there's a company that's worthy of our support, we should do that. Of course, we're not voting on that now. But in any case, I will support adoption of this ordinance.
Did you want to say something, Dennis?
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of like a fine line, because I do feel like some amount of review and maybe just the consent of council would be a really useful thing to include in the process of the final establishment and the location of this service. Not assuming that something's going to be wrong, but we don't know really, because we have no experience at this point, the effect of the business at the location that it ends up being at. So it'd be nice to be able to just review it before it's approved as a location. Now, it seems to me that the problem of whether a certain location can be given a special use permit or not it doesn't really matter in this case so much. I mean, because so far we don't know of any specific site from any other company that might be interested in making an application. So maybe you can just tell me that whether once this ordinance is passed, whether we have a restriction or not about special use. Any company that wants to approach the city to establish a location once can, and the ultimate choice on September 1st is going to be which cities are granted the site or which companies are granted the site.
It'd be which companies are granted the site, and I can, without, I guess, divulging too much, I would just say that the two other dispensary organizations that are interested have expressed interest in the same area that he is looking, and also actually looking at the map, I think that's pretty much it.
And so if they're approving specific businesses, any business that would want to locate in our community would be hampered by placing a restriction on the zoning at this time, because there's just not enough time to approve legally any location.
I think that's a fair assessment, yeah.
Okay, and so therefore, even though I would prefer it, I wouldn't want to eliminate us as a city from that option. Okay.
If I may, just to address that, we are also looking at a cultivation center in Danville, and they are going through a similar process where they're contemplating a special use process, and actually we're going to a meeting on Thursday with their planning and zoning board, and to explain the same thing to them, that if they do that, and again, I full-heartedly agree with you, Councilman Ammons, it's not my timeline, it's the state's. I'm not trying to force you guys into anything, but if you do a special use permit, I could almost guarantee it would preclude a dispensary from locating in Urbana, at least right now.
Okay, did you want to say something else, Charlie?
Yeah, I was just going to point out that, we know this particular location's B4, and, a couple of the other ones probably are concentrated in that central business district anyway, just from the sheer transportation issue. But what I was going to point out is that, the IN1 where Diane indicated she had no problem, that IN1 is mixed in with a lot of B3, just side by side or across the street. So, and given the number of restrictions already based on the 1,000-foot rules and stuff, I'm pretty comfortable with pretty much the locations on this map in general. I think because of those other restrictions. So I think the state's already done some of that work for us. So I'm comfortable moving forward with no restrictions at this point, and that and we've got at least we've got one permitted cultivation area. I sort of lean towards maybe permitting cultivation by right in light industrial, but but I see where staff's coming on that one, so.
Okay. You want to ask another question? Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Ordinance number 2014-08-076, amending the zoning ordinance for medical cannabis dispensaries. Motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And good questions.
It's the Urbana City Council.
I wish
Yes,
we had
good
had
questions.
more time. I wish we had a longer lead time.
Everything gets revisited, don't worry.
Well,
Not this time.
maybe not on this, and I
No, I
totally agree
mean,
with
over
Diane.
time,
I totally agree with Diane that I just, too many times we end up being a rubber stamp, and that's unfortunate. It's indeed unfortunate.
On the appointments, I did send out a letter, Madam Clerk. I had an appointee for the Joint Cable Commission. Did that not get on the agenda? Beg your pardon?
It did not.
Because I wrote it before I left for China. So, okay, well, we'll hold off on that one then. All right, on the agenda, we have two appointments. One's a new appointment, Kelly Murkowski to replace Janelle Hardy on the Champaign County Community Action Board. And then there's a reappointment, William Kubitz to be on the Building Safety Code Board of Appeals. You wanna take them separately? How
Since,
about-
well, they're in the agenda separately, so we probably
Okay,
should
let's take 'em
I'll
separately.
move the first one.
I second that one.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts on Kelly Murkowski. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion, those opposed? That motion carries. And then William Kubitz for a term to expire June 30th, 2017 on the Building Safety Board of Appeals.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
And he, according to my letter, he was appointed initially on May 2nd, 1988. Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you all. There's no further business, so this meeting is...
One question from
Oh, there's a
Mr.
question. Go ahead.
I'm seeing on the agenda item also Mr. Wadsworth.
He's not on the formal agenda,
Ah,
so that's why I didn't put him. I submitted it, but it didn't get on the agenda.
Oh.
And I was not here to notice that, so
yeah,
I think the best thing to do is just,
I'm looking on the electronic agenda, which I downloaded,
okay.
and it is on there. So I don't know if that constitutes
Okay.
sufficient
Well,
notice that we can
It's on the
consider it.
electronic agenda, but not on the printed agenda, Mr. Attorney.
Well, you can always go back to reopen new agenda, or additions to the agenda, and that'd probably be the best way to do it. At the beginning,
Okay.
you can have.
So, anybody want to do that?
Move to add Mr. Kubitz's nomination to the agenda.
Oh, this is Mr.
Wadsworth.
Wadsworth.
Mr. Wadsworth's, well, I'd move to reopen the, additions to the agenda.
Okay,
Second.
okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So
Those
I'm-
opposed?
I move to add the nomination of Mr. Wadsworth to the agenda.
Okay, yeah, he's for the CU Joint CATV Commission and UPTV Commission for a term to expire June 30th, 2015.
So moved.
Okay, so moving Smythe and seconded by Ammons. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to apologize for showing up late. I guess it's easier to get back from China than it is from Knoxville.
Before you all leave, I
It's
think,
not easy to get back from China.
I think
I
the
beg to correct you.
I think the motion you just adopted, one was to go back to the agenda.
Yeah.
Open the agenda, and then two, to add Mr. Wadsworth to the agenda. Now you have to vote on him.
We did. We did both.
It was
We
all
did
part of
both.
it. Okay.
Yeah, we did. We did it all. Okay, thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned due to lack of further business. Thank you.